I made some mistakes when I was very young. I do have a record because of it. But for the last 5.5 years, I've been clean and sober and working hard, and I have A's. I work 30 hours a week, and I make A's in all my classes. I'm treasurer of a student organization. I do all these things just so I can hopefully prove to you that I'm worth hiring and that I'm trustworthy. And they would always be like, we're so thankful that you disclosed that. Thank you so much. And then like the next day I get an email saying, unfortunately, due to your record, we can't hire you. And it just happened so many times my senior year. I graduated unemployed, top of my class. And the craziest thing is that the TV 10 News Columbus covered my graduation as this underdog success story. They like filmed me, they interviewed me, they talked about from prison to graduating with honors. But they didn't talk about the fact that I was graduating completely unemployed, and that I wouldn't get hired for almost another 5 months.
Welcome to episode 33 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Harley Blakeman, founder of Honest Jobs. Harley and I discuss his becoming homeless as a teenager, turning to drugs, spending over a year in prison, and his journey through education and founding a company that helps people with convictions find jobs. Here's Harley Blakeman on People Are the Answer. Harley, thanks so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
It's absolutely an honor. I love what you're doing and excited to share it with the audience. It'd be great if you could just start off by, telling us who you are, where you're based, and what your current role is.
Yeah, my name's Harley Blakeman. I'm obsessed with helping people with criminal records find jobs. I'm currently in Columbus, Ohio, although for the last, 3 months I've been traveling all over the place a little bit in a camper. And right now I'm, founder and CEO of Honest Jobs. That's my role.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that you're obsessed with your work. I think that goes a long way toward your work being successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's required for what I'm doing, and I really do enjoy it. I love it.
In general, I mean, it's kind of come through already, but what would you say motivates you?
Yeah, I think I'm still like a little selfish in the sense that like very successful people and even some that aren't that successful will be like, I'm just solely motivated by like making the world a better place. And the truth is like, I still want something for me. As selfish as that sounds, is like I grew up in a trailer park, didn't have a family. Like my dad passed when I was young. My brother was homeless and wasn't around. My mom was a drug addict. Like I'm just now getting to a point in life where I have health care, where I have like access to the things that so many people are just born with. And I know I'm privileged in a lot of ways, but like, external material things still drive me to some extent, but I would not be working as hard, and I don't think I could actually be a successful founder if what I was working on didn't have the clear social impact that what I'm working on has. So that being said, is like I'm a little selfish. I still want to make money. I still want to like live in a nice home.
That's okay.
Yeah, because there are founders that are like, oh, I grew up with money, and you know what? I don't care. I'll live in an apartment my whole life. I don't care if I have like a nice vehicle and all that. But I think that like I still want to earn my way out of poverty a little bit. I have something to prove to myself and my future family. But all that being said, I'm highly motivated and it's mostly, inspired. Like it's hard to have a job where every day you're inspired. And at Honest Jobs, our team is really lucky that like the result of doing a good job is extremely inspirational. When we get people hired, sometimes they don't even care to send us an email and say thank you, and that's okay. They don't owe us a thank you. But we also have people that write thorough thank yous that are so long, and we get video testimonials of people tearing up telling us how much it's changed their lives and how their children have healthcare for the first time ever and things like that. So, at the end of the day, like that's what keeps me really, really excited about working on the issue we're working on.
Awesome. You touched briefly on your difficult upbringing. Where was that, and could you go into some more detail on what it was like?
Yeah, I don't want to act like it was like this horrible life. I think it was lower income, right? So, but I wasn't like abused as a child. I didn't really like go hungry until I was like a homeless teenager. Like as a child, my family moved a lot. I had a very small family. So it was like my mom, my dad, my brother. They were both the black sheeps of their families. So like neither of them had like brothers and sisters they hung out with or talked to or visited. So I born in Dallas, Texas, was there until I was like 4. Then I moved to Hope, Arkansas, which is this tiny town in Arkansas where nothing happens. And I moved to Florida when I was like 8. And Florida is where I stayed until I was 18. And it was a very small town with one red light, 1,300 people in the whole town. And that's where I grew up. And no one goes to college. Like all of the kids I knew from high school, I might know like 2 people that went to college other than myself.
Wow.
And I lived in a double wide trailer on a dirt road, and both my parents worked normal, low paying jobs in a tiny little town. Neither of them had gone to college. And really, my life got really difficult. I'd say when I was like 12, 13, I started not doing so well in school. At the same time, my mother lost like 80, 90 pounds after like a 18, 19-year marriage with my father. She just lost a ton of weight and then divorced my dad. uh, and it was really unexpected for me, and I didn't understand it at all. I had no idea what was going on or why. And I just remember my mom stopped coming home at night, and then like abruptly my dad was like, "Your mom's not coming home again." And he's like, "Your mom wants to be with other people. She doesn't want to be here." I don't think my dad handled it real well. I think he was very blunt with me at a very young age, and he shouldn't have. He should have been a little gentler. But I also think that my mom didn't even attempt to explain to me what happened. She was just like gone. Literally, it was like one day she was there, one day she wasn't. And I think until not, probably 10 years, I struggled with thinking that I was a big reason why my mom left, is that I was, because I wasn't doing well in school, because I had ADD, because I was misbehaving or something. So like my mom left, and not only did she leave, she got pregnant twice and had 2 more children with another guy, like very shortly after leaving my dad. And she was extremely addicted to drugs and alcohol. She got those kids taken away from her before my dad passed away. But then, between 13 and 15, my dad passed away when I was 15. So now I hadn't really had any relationship with my mom for the last 2.5 years. She's had children with another man that got taken away from her. I've kind of grown to like resent my mother a little bit in this time. Then my dad passes away, and I have no one. I have no one to go to, no one to live with. My older brother is now getting severely addicted to Oxycontin and Xanax and heroin and things. So I just slipped through the cracks. Like when my dad passed away, like my mom offered to take me in. I went and stayed with her for one night, and it was like a single wide trailer in the woods that wasn't her house. It was just some guy she was dating. They didn't have food. They didn't have a bed for me to sleep on. I was sleeping on a couch. And after like 2 nights, I was just like, screw this. I'm old enough to live on my own. And I just went and stayed with friends for the next 2.5 years, 3 years, until I got in trouble. So,
Wow.
That's kind of the really rocky. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a lot to have to go through, in your first 15 years of life. A lot of people at that age don't even have to worry about so many of those things. So, I mean, it's incredible that you've made it to where you were. Obviously, there were bumps on the road in the way, and so you were homeless at age 15. You dropped out of school, and I know you started using and selling drugs. Can you talk about how you kind of had to get into that?
Yes, like you said, after becoming homeless, I was still going to school, but it became really hard. Like I didn't have transportation, I didn't have clean laundry half the time, and I was very depressed. So I was barely going, and when I was going, I was like selling weed at school. I was like starting to like sell weed in like 7th grade, 8th grade, and a principal pulled me in the principal's office like, Harley, I'm really sorry. I know what your life is really hard right now with what happened to your dad, but I've heard a lot that you're bringing drugs to school. You can't do that. You got to stop doing that. So I just stopped coming to school. I just never went back. At 16 years old, I just never went back. And what do you do when you're not doing what you're supposed to do? You start hanging out with people that you're not supposed to hang out with. So instead of being in school, I was hanging out with either the kids that are 17, 18 that have dropped out, or I'm hanging out with the 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old kids that are losers that want to hang out with a 15-year-old kid and help and like show him how to sell drugs, which is exactly what happened. Is I'm 16 years old hanging out with these like 20-something-year-old guys that have all been locked up probably, or they have had their own, honestly, most of these people had really rough lives. So similar to me, they had really rough lives, but they didn't grow out of it. And I'm hanging out with these guys and these girls as well. And interestingly enough, I start using drugs because we're bored. We're in a small town. There's nothing to do. You're hanging out. You smoke weed. You drink, whatever. Well, I think a lot of the reason why I slipped through the cracks and really fell into drugs and crime was because I had nothing to lose. And I felt like I had nothing to lose. I'm like, why should I even care? Because literally no one cares. Like, I don't have a mom that's going to cry. I don't have a dad that's going to cry. I don't have a brother that's going to be mad at me. No one is going to care. So I'm just like, why not just fit in and be cool with these people that want me around, right? So these people want me around. So I start doing cocaine. I start doing Xanax and Oxycontin. And basically I did everything but meth and heroin. And by the time I was 16, I had done a little bit of everything. And I really got addicted to Oxycontin because for me, downers, painkillers just made me numb. And that's really what I thrived on. Is like, I didn't want to feel anything. And while I started using them, a woman I knew would be like, hey, anybody, she was selling them. So she would say, here, I'll give you 50 of them. And you can sell them for this much, and you can just pay me back this much. So basically, she gave me the equation and said, like, here's 50 of them, sell 40 of them for this much. You can keep the profit from the other 10. So she gave me a way to make money, and it was easy. It was like, I have them. People all over town want them. It's that easy. So I started doing that, and it quickly, for me, the numbers made sense. It was easy enough to say, oh, I get it for this price, I sell it for this price. And I really didn't have anything to lose, and I didn't have to go to school. So for me, I was just skating around town on my skateboard, and I'd talk to 5 or 6 people throughout the day that wanted some, and I could make $100 or $200 a day doing that. This was a grown woman. This woman was like a registered nurse who was like giving me a 16, 17-year-old kid Oxycontin. So the more money I made, the more drugs I did, the more reckless I became. It was like a cycle of like me convincing myself that this is who I am and this is like an identity that I can have when I really don't have one outside of this. It was dark, and after getting arrested, I stopped selling, but I kept using, and it just got darker and darker.
So, I mean, that is a really tough path to be on. You mentioned in one of our previous conversations that because of some of the laws in Florida, there were busloads of people coming down to get medicine and then going elsewhere to sell them. Yeah.
So I don't know that anyone listening will know about this, but I'll sure try to give the best education I can. From what I remember is that before the opioid epidemic was like a mainstream topic in the news and press and all that, was people really got addicted to prescription pills before they got addicted to heroin and people, you hear about fentanyl. That's a fairly recent phenomenon, the fentanyl stuff. But it's very common for you to hear, I got a car accident and I got prescribed this and then I got addicted. And then when they cut me off, I still had the addiction. So basically in Florida was one of the first states to say, you can come from out of state to go to a doctor in Florida and get prescribed pills. And then on top of that, there was these things that they called pain clinics, which it's an all-in one-stop shop. You come, you stand in line, you fill out some paperwork, they do an MRI, and then you just tell them, my back hurts really bad. And they say, well, we don't see anything wrong with your back. And you say, it hurts really, really, really bad. And there was actually, it's like law that they can't deny you pain medicine because they can't prove that you're not in pain. So in Florida, anyone who wanted to get pain medicine just said their back hurt, and you go to these pain clinics, and it's all in one. You get an MRI, you get the prescription, and then there's even a desk you go to with your prescription, and they'll give you the OxyContin right there on site. So literally anyone that's 18 years old who says their back hurts can get an unlimited supply. Unlimited meaning you can renew it every month, but they would give you 90 OxyContin 80s, 90 OxyContin 40s, and 90 Xanax bars, all every 30 days.
Wow, that's unbelievable, honestly.
Yeah, and it's dirt cheap for the most part, because the insurance and the companies have found ways to make it to where, you're paying maybe $30-$40 for all of this, but the street value of it is like $7,000. So what do you think is going to happen when a state says, hey, anybody can get it, we're going to give it to you for $1 and you can turn around and sell it for $100? The policymakers who approved this were not ignorant to the fact of what was going to happen, and that's why it's sad that it happened this way, is because it was not criminals, underground criminals created this industry. It was doctors, insurance companies, big pharma lobbied to make sure that they had ample customer demand. And to your point, I met people in Florida that had rode a bus from Oklahoma, 60 people on a bus coming from Oklahoma or Kansas, and they all came to Florida. They share the gas money. They all stand in line, and they all leave with all of those drugs, and then they just sell them in Oklahoma, and they make a ton of money, or they use them in Oklahoma. Wow. Sorry, I'm focusing on Oklahoma. It was all of the states, but I'm saying, as far as 6-7 states away, people were driving to Florida to do this.
Wow, what policy failure! But like you said, they knew what they were doing, and man, we could sit here and talk about big pharma and the mess that it's created, but we don't need to dig too far into that at the moment. So you got arrested. You were sentenced to 14 months in prison.
That's right.
Yep. And how old were you at the time?
I was arrested when I was 18. I was sentenced when I was 19.
And, what were you thinking, first when you got arrested and then when you got your sentencing?
Yeah, so when I got arrested, it was completely unexpected. Never been arrested before in my life. I was just sitting at a red light in Savannah, Georgia, with a backpack full of drugs in my trunk. Just sitting at a red light, 5 cop cars surround me. I get pulled out of my car at gunpoint. They put me in the back of a cop car and they said, "Can we search your vehicle?" And I remember telling them no. And I was like, I kind of pawned it off. I was like, no, that's not my vehicle. I can't let you search it because it's not mine. Because technically, I just turned 18 and it was still not in my name. It was some weird thing from I got some money from my dad passed. And it was enough for me to get it under my mom's name, whatever. So I said no. And then they searched it anyways, immediately. They said, okay. They shut the door and they went over and they opened the door and they started searching it. I just thought it was funny. Whatever, I don't care. But at that point, as soon as they opened the door and I saw the cop go in the back seat, it hit me. And it's so weird. I was terrified until the moment he opened the car door. And then I literally just leaned back and then I laid down in the back seat of the cop car and I went to sleep. And wow. I remember they woke me up an hour later and they were like, "You're going to jail." And I was like, okay. And then they took me to a room where they tried to get me to tell on people. They asked me, they said, "Oh, you're going to go to prison forever," or whatever, And basically at that point it was really weird because it was I had lived this life of depression and anxiety and loneliness. And for the first time I felt like something took control of me. Because I didn't have a dad to do it. I didn't have a mom to do it. I didn't have anybody to tell me, you're going to sit down. You're going to do this. And it's this weird thing where, it was peaceful. as strange as that sounds, it was peaceful.
After all that chaos, I get it. I certainly, I don't think I get it, but I understand where you're coming from 100%.
Yeah, now that my life is in order, it would be horrifying to be uprooted and sent to jail. I think that's for most people. But when your life is so chaotic and meaningless and painful, it can actually be a relief to just be I don't have to try and find purpose or meaning or a place where I fit in. I just so Uh, got to jail. Jail was scary, but I was also withdrawing from drugs, so I think I was a little out of it. I got out on bail within like 48 hours. And then I became homeless again because they took my car, they took all of my money, they took everything from me. And now I'm just out on bail with nothing. So I had to go back to Florida. I lived in Florida for almost a whole year with a friend on their couch while I waited to go to court. And like I said before, I was still addicted to drugs. I was still a drug addict. I just wasn't committing crime anymore. I was like, I'm not selling nothing. I'm not hanging, not doing any of this stuff. But when I went to court, I had basically been getting plea bargains. Like they're telling me, hey, you're going to do 10 years in prison if you don't take this plea bargain. We kind of come out of gridlock where they weren't offering me anything less than 3 years. They were trying to make me do 3 years in prison. First time ever being arrested, 18-year-old kid, no record, nothing. But I had taken a lot of drugs across state lines, 800 Oxycontin basically. And I had a public defender. I'm just like a public defender. And I think she did an incredible job considering she was a public defender. I mean, they have massive caseloads. It's a crime how many people we make them manage. So anyway, she was like, hey, I think your best bet is to do what's called an open-ended plea. You're agreeing to do 3 years in prison, but with an open-ended plea, you get the opportunity to speak to the judge and give the judge the chance to lower your sentence. Because, a plea bargain, the judge isn't involved at all. Like, a judge is not involved at all in a plea. It's literally the district attorney, the lawyer representing the state is negotiating with your lawyer.
Right.
So not a lot of justice is brought there because a judge is the one who's supposed to say, look, I know all the facts and this is what I think. So anyways, I did this open-ended plea, and basically when I signed that paperwork, I'm like, I might do there's like a 90% chance I'm doing 3 years in prison because I just agreed to do it. However, I went in front of this judge, and the judge heard all the facts, and they said he's agreed to do 3 years, but he's asking for the chance to speak to you. And in 10 minutes time, the public defender was like, hey, I want you to go up there and tell them this, this, and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, okay. So I go up there, just baby faced as could be, and my lips are shaking because I'm so scared. And I'm like, hey, I admit I did this. I was wrong. I'm not a bad person. I'm not violent. I don't want to hurt anybody. I think prison's going to hurt me more than it's going to help me. I really just need, I'm sober now. I really need the chance to rehabilitate, and I don't think prison's going to help me. Could you please consider lowering my sentence to something that isn't so damaging? Like 3 years it's going to hurt me a lot. And, she spoke to it, and she was like, you're right. I can tell you don't deserve to be in prison. You've had a rough life. The system failed you. And then she said, but I'm sorry, you brought 800 Oxycontin into my state and sold them to people of this city, of this state. I have to send you to prison. And that's why she gave me a year and a day. So I had already been in jail for 3 months and some change. And then when I got sentenced to a year and a day, I got sentenced to prison. So if it's a year or less, you go to jail. If it's a year and a day or more, you go to prison. So I got sentenced to prison. She was like, I'm sending you to prison. So, yeah. Hopefully I answered the question. Sorry about that for the long answer. Just a lot of detail to share, obviously.
No, absolutely. And, going through the judicial process and then spending the time in prison, how did your mind sort of change over that time and your perspective on life?
Yeah, it's weird. It was weird because like from the time I turned to, the age of turning to a man, right? You think about how instrumental 15, 16, 17 is for someone. That time period's pretty important for like a young man's development. And I didn't have anybody. Like I was just rambling, couch to couch surfing, trying to find that. And so it was really tough. I think I was forced to grow up really fast. One thing, like a lot of people, I know 25-year-olds that haven't grown up. It's super common where they don't have any accountability. They don't have any direction. They don't like, a lot of that. So like for me, it was like in jail before I went to prison, in jail for a couple months, I quickly realized, like, oh shit, like this place is not nice. Like people here are not nice. There's a lot of angry people. There's a lot of people that don't care about social norms or like respect each other. Um, uh, so I think while I was there, in an odd way, I did find people in jail and prison that were almost like willing to act as a bit of a father figure or an older brother. I can tell you, when I got to prison, my bunkmate, my first day in prison was a horrible day, and I can share with you more what that was like. But my bunkmate, his name was Rat, like a guy who snitched on somebody. His name was Rat, and he offered me something. My first day, he was like, "Hey, let me know if you need anything," and I was like, "Okay, well, people told me when you get to prison, if somebody offers you something, don't take it because whatever." And he ended up being a super nice guy. He was a very religious guy. Also had been to prison twice for drugs, but he was like took care of his mom. Religious guy, very nice guy, and he helped me a lot and gave me a lot of advice about just being a young man, already not having my parents around. He would talk to me about how when his mom passed away, how he handled it, and like a lot of guys in prison encouraged me to get my GED and said like you're a really smart kid. Like you don't need to come back to prison. Like here you need to focus on these things so when you get out, like this is your last time here. So like I think my dad passed before I got in trouble, but like a lot of people I ran into while I was in jail and prison were the worst case scenario. Like they were violent, they were in gangs, all they wanted to do was fight and sell drugs. And then I also met people that were like, hey man, like I don't deserve to be here, but I'm 40. Like my path is, I've kind of lived this out, but you're too young, man. Like people encouraged me to do a lot of positive things while I was there. So I think the experience overall was really good for me. I'm very lucky that I wasn't physically assaulted, not even once. I didn't get punched. I didn't get raped. I didn't
Wow.
and I was very lucky because I saw dozens of people get the crap beat out of them. And luckily I never saw a sexual assault, but that they did happen. And I'm physically, from a physical perspective, I was the prime suspect of a sexual assault or a physical assault. I think luckily, one of the skills that served me really well then and now is I have a very good ability to read a room and read the situation and read people. And I think that's helped me as an entrepreneur. But I had to learn very quickly that you can't just talk. You can't just ask people random questions. Be like, hey, why'd you do that? People will literally stand up and grab you by your shirt and be like, why the F are you in my conversation? Like for no, like just escalation for no reason. So like you really have to, like in prison, people would be like, hey, why don't you come play cards with us? You start playing cards with them, and then you end up getting beat up by them because they don't like something you said. And it was just a very volatile environment, and you really learn like how to read the room, read the dynamics between these people don't like these people, and how do I fit in a way where I'm not limiting my ability to like exist, but also I'm not going to accidentally step on somebody's toe or say the wrong thing in the wrong place, wrong time. Because there were people in my dorm room who tried to commit suicide. There were people in my dorm room who got sent to the ER multiple times for just the tiniest thing. So sorry, I don't mean to fixate on that so much, but like that was the biggest takeaway, was like good stuff came from it, but I was very lucky that I didn't come home with like PTSD. I mean, I tell you, the first couple of years out of prison, I still had dreams that were like bad dreams. Like I'd wake up thinking about the one time like I saw that guy get his face stomped on a whole lot, and it was like shocking, like it really scared the shit out of you. And like I'd still have dreams about it. So like imagine me being the person that got my face stomped on or whatever. Like people come home from prison and they actually have PTSD, and especially worse assaults than fighting. So anyways, we can move on. I apologize.
No, I mean, it is certainly a life-altering experience, and it seemed like you handled it as well as you could. And I know you did end up getting your GED. Was that right after prison, or?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, people encouraged me to get my GED, so I signed up for the GED class. And while signing up for the GED, that was like the first thing I did in prison, was I signed up and I studied for it. And about a month into my prison sentence, I took the GED exam and I passed. And I was like, oh, okay, well, what do I do now? And they're like, that's all we have. And now that you've passed it, it's done. And I was like, so there's no more programs? There's no more like learning? And they're like, nope, just sit still for the next 11 months. And I'm like, oh no. So that's whenever I really started going to the library once a week. And like I was reading a book, 2 books every week. And I just became obsessed with any business books I could get, any personal development books I could get. And that's kind of that was part of the reason why people in prison encouraged me. They were like, hey, not only did you pass, but you got like really good scores. And it was sad because when I took the GED, I took it with about 60 guys. I was probably the youngest person. And, like 9 of us passed. So when you think about that, these are people where their average reading level scores are in like 5th grade. And they never passed the 9th grade math. And then that's just where it ended, or the 8th grade math, So it's a really sad situation. I think when people saw my scores, they're like, why the hell are you even here, man? Like, you shouldn't even be here. Like, you're a good kid and you're smart. Like, you need to get out and never come back. So, like, that inspired me too, to read a lot. And by the time I was coming home from prison, I was just like, yo, I'm not coming back. Like, there's something great for me out there. I don't know what it is yet, but, like, I'm getting out and I'm not coming back. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you left with that mindset. Where did you go when you got out? And I know you started your further education after that as well.
Yeah, so about 3-4 months before I got out, I started receiving letters from my dad's sister. So like I said, my parents weren't close with their families, but I had gone to Ohio 3 or 4 times for Christmas to visit my dad's family, which was his sisters and his mom in Columbus, Ohio. So at some point they found out I was incarcerated. They hunted me down and they found me and they started writing me letters, which was God. Thank God for that. I mean, if I have anybody to give credit to for anything in my life that's been success, it's my grandma and my aunts here in Columbus, Ohio. It just meant the world to like start receiving letters because, I was there for almost a year without a single letter, without a phone call, without a visit at, 19 years old. So that's a rough place to be in life at that young. And they, offered, they were like, if you're open to it, we'd love to pick you up. The day you get out, we want to bring you back to Columbus, Ohio. And it wasn't glorious. It wasn't like a luxury, but they were like, we have a finished basement. You can like stay in our basement. We have a bed down there. It's not, it's pretty nice. So I took them up on that and I got back to Ohio and it was hilarious because as soon as I got out of prison, I was like, hey, there's a Chinese buffet right down the road. Can we please go? Because I'm like, I've been eating prison food for 14 months. It's terrible. Can we just go eat? I want to scarf down on some like good food. And they're like, no, we have to drive all the way back to Columbus, Ohio. We're not going to sit at a restaurant. We'll get you some McDonald's at the drive-thru. And I was like, okay, I've been thinking about that Chinese food for so long. It upset me. So anyways, we get to Columbus, Ohio, and the next morning I just go to bed because we got there so late. I go to bed. And the next morning they sit me down, my aunt and her husband, who's a principal, and he's like, hey, we've got some house rules for you. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, every day you have to do chores. Every day you have to have a job. At least 5 days a week, you need to be going to work. You're not allowed to be out past 8 p.m. You're not allowed to use any internet without our supervision. You're not allowed to. It was crazy. They gave me this crazy list, and immediately I had like a panic attack. Because I'm like, yo, I haven't had any rules in my life since I was like 14. And then now I don't really know you, and you're just coming at me with like this long list of, and it like almost broke me. But I ended up like appreciating it because I'll tell you what, I moved out in less than 60 days. I had my own apartment. I had my own vehicle. Because I was working 60 hours a week at this, washing dishes and cooking at these places. So anyways, but after moving out with them, I had a car, I had an apartment, I had a job, and I ended up getting into community college. One of the like high school girls at this restaurant I worked at was like, oh, I'm going to Columbus State Community College. And I was like, I would love to go to college. And she's like, why don't you? I'm like, well, I have a felony and all I have is my GED. They probably won't let me in. She's like, yeah, they will. It's a community college. They'll let you in. I was like, all right. Well, literally the next day I had off. I went and I just applied. And then 2 months later, they're like, you're in. So I adjusted my schedule. I got some student loans, and I started figuring that out. And it was amazing. My first year there, I got like almost straight A's. I was taking just like general business and general ed classes, but after 3 semesters, I applied to Ohio State University. And this was, I hadn't even talked to anybody about it. I was like, I'm not going to get in, like, but, why not? Like, this is kind of the nature of who I am, is I always want to like prove to myself that I can do something that's like just a little out of reach. And I applied, and just randomly, I got a letter in the mail that said, you've been accepted to Ohio State University. And I couldn't freaking believe it, because both my aunts, a lot of my family are graduates of Ohio State, and I was an Urban Meyer fan because I grew up right outside of Gainesville, Florida, and he was a Gators coach. The year I went to Ohio, he transferred to Ohio State, and he was the Buckeye coach. And getting accepted into Ohio State, I cried, because I'm like, holy crap. In 2 years, I've gone from being a drug addict, high school dropout, in prison, to owning my own car, having my own apartment, getting into Ohio State University. So it was a really big deal for me. And at that point, just like all that mattered to me was like my education. So I was just hyper focused on I want to graduate from the school. And I remember actually one of my aunts, it really upset me. I remember it till today. One of my aunts was like, oh yeah, did you hear Harley's going to try to graduate from Ohio State University? And I was like, I can't believe she said it like that. I forget exactly how she said it, but I was like, I can't believe, like the way she worded it had some doubt to it. And I was like, wow.
Right.
But I ended up, and then one of my bosses at this restaurant graduated from Ohio State Business School, just like I did. And he was like, oh man, good luck, man. Fisher College of Business is really hard. And I was like, why does everyone doubt that I can do this? Like, I'm going to prove them wrong. So I hyper focused. I think I had like a 3.7 GPA when I graduated. I had done a Six Sigma certification. Was the treasurer of a student organization. I had done all these things. I ended up graduating with honors, and I absolutely love learning. So
That's awesome. Just to hear like the effort that you went through and the dedication that you had towards your education, it's really incredible what you were able to do. So congratulations on just making it that far.
Yeah, and it's funny is I still don't know how to spell because grammar, spelling, geography, like the stuff that you learn in like middle school and high school just wasn't there. I was either not present or I was on drugs. And then when you get accepted into college, they don't go back and teach you that stuff. They're just like, you pass the exam, you're in. Now you don't need to go back and like. So it's hilarious. It's like all through college, and even now I have executives for Honest Jobs that are like proofreading emails for me and stuff, because I like it's just a funny thing that I did so well in college, but like the foundational stuff I just kind of like skipped over completely.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And when you got out of college, you had sort of that stark reality of the difficulty of landing a job with a record.
Yeah.
So talk about that process. I know you interviewed with 89 companies. Talk about what the process and, who ultimately hired you.
Yeah. So once I was at Ohio State, I kind of had this assumption that like, okay, this is the next chapter of my life. Like, I no longer have that problem. So while I was going to Ohio State, I couldn't really apply for full-time jobs. So I was still applying for like internships or little part-time jobs, but I still was like looking to either increase my pay or work at a job where I could at least learn new skills. So I went from washing dishes to retail, where I was like an assistant manager, which at least I got to put the word manager on my resume, and I was like counting down the drawer and like doing some stuff that was better than saying I was a dishwasher. And then my junior year, I interviewed and applied for so many internships, and I couldn't get it. And I'm like, man, I don't know if it's my record or what, but I didn't get into any like professional internships. So that summer I got a job with a consulting firm in Columbus, but it was because my grandma knew the guy who started the firm. They were like a 50-person firm, but my grandma of all people was like, "Hey, can you talk to my grandson? He's had a really tough time." And the guy was like, "My grandma told me that you have a record." So I talked to him. He was like a Harvard MBA, very successful guy, and he didn't care I had a record. He was like, "Of course I'm going to help you." And it was a very basic job though, but I got to work in Excel a lot, and I was getting to use some of the stuff from my business degree. And by the time I graduated, though, I was like, I'm the treasurer of a student org. I have honors, Six Sigma certification. I'm fluent in Excel. I have done invoice tracking at my previous retail job. I had a lot of good skills. And senior year at Fisher College of Business, they have 800 companies come to both career fairs where there's booths everywhere and they're looking for people. And pretty much like your resume determines if you get an interview because they're just like looking at that. So I go around, had spent weeks preparing for these career fairs where I knew the companies I want to work for. I know I can explain why. I can explain why I'm a good fit. I can talk about your culture and values, like all that stuff they want. They want you to do research on them so that you can. I had done all that, and I probably applied for like 100 positions. Like you said, probably 89 of them reached out to me. The majority of them were like, "Hey, we want to interview you." I interview with most of these companies more than once because they take you through like 3 rounds of interviews for like these. Typically, it's either directly into a very entry level management position or it's a program where they'll take you through like a 6 to 9 month professional development program and then they place you as a manager. Well, anyways, I'd get to the final interview, and in the interviews, I'd say, before you guys make me an offer, if you're going to make me an offer, I want you to know in advance I made some mistakes when I was very young. I do have a record because of it. But for the last 5.5 years, I've been clean and sober and working hard, and I have A's. I work 30 hours a week, and I make A's in all my classes. I'm treasurer of a student organization. I do all these things just so I can hopefully prove to you that I'm worth hiring and that I'm trustworthy. And they would always be like, "We're so thankful that you disclosed that. Thank you so much." And then like the next day I get an email saying, "Unfortunately, due to your record, we can't hire you." And it just happened so many times my senior year. I graduated unemployed, top of my class. And the craziest thing is that the TV 10 News Columbus covered my graduation as this underdog success story. They like filmed me, they interviewed me, they talked about from prison to graduating with honors, but they didn't talk about the fact that I was graduating completely unemployed, that I wouldn't get hired for almost another 5 months. So it was really awkward because it was the proudest day of my life, walking across the stage, getting my diploma, knowing that like this is an inspirational story that's going to inspire others. But then like a week later, I'm sitting at home with no job, no school, applying for jobs on Indeed, wondering who the hell's going to hire me. And
Right.
I just kept trying and trying and trying, and eventually I got hired at a company called Owens Corning. They manufacture insulation. It was like a 45-minute drive to work every day, almost an hour-long drive. Really tough working conditions, on my feet for 12, 13 hours a day. I was a shift supervisor. So I did like scheduling and payroll and a bunch of other things, but mostly, I was on my feet on the plant floor, walking around, supervising stuff. I enjoyed it, but it was a hard job and very much blue collar, and it's not what I was going for. I got straight A's so that I could get what I wanted. I wanted to work in a different industry, but that's what I got stuck with. So that motivated Honest Jobs. Like that whole story I've shared up to this point was all motivation for Honest Jobs, because when I look at how hard it was for me to find a job, I look at all the advantages I had at that point of being white, having an advanced, a college degree with honors, having transportation, having a housing, having mental health, having good credit score. Like at that point, I had like everything you could possibly have in your favor, and it was still that hard for me. So when I think back to the people coming home from prison who are people of color, they're not going to be able to go to college. They don't have a family member that's going to give them a place to stay for 2.5 months. The odds were stacked so high against most people coming home from prison that I really wanted to build Honest Jobs.
Yeah, I mean that's remarkable. It's a remarkable story. The fact that you didn't give up throughout the difficulty of that process, and like you said, it really highlights how ridiculous it is to move forward with your life once you get one interaction with the system like that. And what a travesty it is. For all for you, there's obviously you, and I'm sure there's a handful of others like you, but there's got to be dozens of others that don't have the experience that you did, and you know don't make it to where they want to go and give up at some point doing things that they're able to do, which oftentimes end up being criminal
Yeah.
things. But they need money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that experience, I mean, certainly makes sense why you would want to create honest jobs. So, just for our listeners, if you could kind of give the elevator pitch of honest jobs.
Yeah. So, in America, people with felony convictions alone account for $77 billion in household income being lost every year. So every year, because they're missing work, it costs the U.S. economy $77 billion in lost income just from people with felonies. So there's a lot of people that go to jail that don't get a felony. These are people that have the more severe crimes that you might be sentenced to prison for. That's an enormous economic loss from a GDP perspective, but also you got to think about the fact that that lost income is significantly disproportionately affecting poor people. So it's poor people being more poor, and it's people of color being more disadvantaged, because it also disproportionately affects black and brown people. So macro perspective, that's the problem. And Honest Jobs we identified a way to help employers more easily hire candidates that are oftentimes overlooked. So Honest Jobs is the nation's largest fair chance employment platform. Right now, we have roughly 1,000 employers across the U.S. that intentionally hire formerly incarcerated people through our platform. And essentially what we've done is created a two-sided marketplace where job seekers can create an account, employers can create an account, and we have a matching algorithm that says based on the nature of your crime, these are jobs where you have the best chance of making it through the background check. So they can apply for any job they want, but we nudge them towards jobs that we're more confident they can get hired for. And what that's resulted in is the national average for someone to find a job with a felony is about 8 months to find a job. And on our platform, it's 27 days from the time they create an account to their first day on the job. And also, the average pay we get them is actually 3 times higher than the national average for people with felonies. So kind of our tagline is we help people with criminal records find better jobs faster, which almost sounds cheesy, but it's actually real. Yeah. We are helping them find better jobs, and we're helping them find them significantly faster.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, when you and I talked previously, we discussed, how much, all that time that you're cutting back from the process, and also, all the lost wages that occur during that intense time period. So, I mean, you're really creating tremendous impact, and, I love it. I really appreciate it. And I think it's incredible that you're helping give these people a chance, and also giving businesses the opportunity to focus on this and specifically hire people that were formerly incarcerated.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about our work, oftentimes it's very centered around the job seekers. It's definitely the social impact side is on the job seeker side, and it's where we can put the $77 billion back into the economy, is like helping them earn money. But on the much not as sexy side is the employer side, where these employers are all competing for talent that's in the same place, and it's the same people, right? They're the same people are on Indeed, the same people are, on these recruiting firms and stuff. And the problem is all of them were already getting applications from formerly incarcerated people, but they were weeding them out of their process for the most part. It was a matching problem, and it was a process problem that we worked hard to identify. So our algorithm, after years of research with legal teams, which is the least favorite thing I could ever do, is like be working with legal teams at big corporations, we were able to find the little problems that we could actually address at scale. So companies, for instance, I'll give an example, a major clothing retailer, massive company in America, posted jobs with us, and they were working with us. And they said, in 1 quarter of working with Honest Jobs, we had like 80 something people go through our consideration process. Well, before working with you, we only had 30 people go through the process the entire year prior. So you helped us hire twice as many people in 1 quarter of the time. And it was just a process issue that they were weeding out candidates that they wanted to hire. And our system actually helped them not do that. So especially these big companies, they don't even there's so many levels between like executives making a decision, the legal team, then the HR team, then the actual recruiting team, and then the software they're using to automate. That's one of the problems of AI and automation and hiring, is that it's very hard to not let any bias get into it. And, people with criminal records are pretty low on the totem pole. They're like, oh, a felony, next. Like they're just thinking like that's a clear person to weed out as someone with a felony. But the truth is these companies are making commitments to second chance and fair chance hiring, especially after, George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and all the push for better diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. 1 in 3 men of color have a felony. 1 in 6, 1 in 3 black men have a felony. 1 in 6 brown people have a felony, whereas only 1 in 17 white men have a felony. So when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you pretty much have to say we're not going to use a criminal record to be a single determination of if you get in or not. We have to look deeper than that, and that's what our system's been able to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, it's clear from your story what inspired the idea, but when did you get the idea to create Honest Jobs? And, was it while you were at Owens Corning? And then, when did you start it? When did you leave your job?
So as I was being rejected for jobs while I was still in college, I'm being rejected while I'm still in college. I had an Excel sheet. And the title of the Excel sheet was Clear Hire. And that was going to be like my little company name, Clear Hire. And I was basically creating a credit score for people with criminal records, where I take a bunch of different variables, data, and I can kind of statistically determine how safe it is to employ you. That was the beginning of Honest Jobs. It was an Excel sheet where I had a page where you could input a bunch of values, and then the next page generated like a report that said, based on the scores we got, here's a summary describing what the score means for each of these things, and you should hire them, and here's why. And I thought it was super cool. I knew nothing about business, knew nothing about tech, knew nothing about venture. And I talked to people about it. I tinkered on it. I worked on it a lot. But all I wanted was a job. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I just wanted to work for a company that gave me something cool to work on. But when I couldn't get that, I was like, this is crazy. Maybe Clear Hire is really something that needs to exist. Like, these companies are missing out on people like me. Like, I am, smart. I'm capable. I'm hungry. I want to work. Like, let me work. So that's really what inspired it, is the combination of like frustration. And, I've said it before, and like, I was pissed. Like, I was just angry. I was so angry that I was like, this is crazy. I'm gonna fix this because it's pissing me off. And I did have a job at Owens Corning, but while I was there, I wrote my book, How to Find a Job and Build a Career with a Criminal Record. And that book took off. It was selling like crazy. I sold like 7,000 copies. I got invited to the White House. And wow. I was getting invited to speak at prisons. And I was even making a little money on the side doing like workshops at prisons where I talked to people about how to get a job. And I was kind of moonlighting, getting these like digital marketing certifications. And I was learning about building like how like creators will have like, follow my newsletter, like join my community where you can talk to other creators and stuff. Like, I basically had a community where it was $7 a month to be part of the community. But with the community, you got access to some courses, you got access to my book for free, you could post questions, and me and other people would comment and help each other with stuff. And I had about 35 people paying me $7 a month. And this was while I was at Owens Corning. So like I'd get home from working a 13-hour shift and I'd get on my computer and like try to convince a couple more people to like join and stuff. And I eventually went through a weekend accelerator. It was 3 days long where this venture capital firm would take you through a weekend long thing to help you iterate on your product and see if it was something that could work. And in that 3 days, I got the first glimpse at like how to build a startup. And I just couldn't walk away from it after that. I was so obsessed with like, I'm going to build a business. And pretty quickly I was able to look at like my customer acquisition cost against the lifetime value. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like this isn't going to work. Like I can't be running digital ads to get a user for $20 when they're paying me $7 a month and blah, blah, blah. Right. So I surveyed all my customers and I asked them, what are the number one issues that you need help with? And the number one thing across the board was finding a job. Like I'm skilled, just like me. They were like, I know, like I have a good skill set. I'm motivated. I'm all these things. I keep getting rejected. So I was like, well, this takes me back to Clear Hire. Like, I don't know how to do it, but this is the disconnect between skilled and qualified workers. And like right now's epitome of this is that there's tons of open jobs. I mean, God, there's so many open jobs. And we've got millions of people with felony records that they may not be able to fill all of those jobs, but there's some of those jobs they can fill. And there's just this mismatch that at a grand scale, it's an enormous problem. It's 10% of the workforce is being mismanaged. I mean, it's costing us billions of dollars. So that's what got us started. I went from an Excel sheet in college to being really mad to building an online community, surveying that community, and then finding out that, they're having the same problem I was having. Like, it was kind of full circle twice, brought me back to it.
And now you work with over 600 companies, is that right?
Over 900 now.
Oh, wow, I must have had an outdated number. So growth continues. Yep. That's great to hear.
Yeah, almost 1,000. We're already planning a video where we're going to celebrate 1,000 employers here. It'll probably come out in a couple weeks.
Well, congratulations on that. And I know the platform's free to join for employers and for applicants. How is the business sustained? Does the employer pay you when they hire someone?
Yeah, so it is free for everybody, and we're pretty passionate about that. Obviously, I believe it's possible to sustain a business on that model, or else I wouldn't be doing it. But access is an issue. We want everyone to be able to access this. From the job seeker side, they don't have money, most of them. And if they did, they need it for other things. So job seekers can join completely free. We've never made a single cent off of a job seeker. On the employer side, we did experiment. We tried making it to where you could join for free, but you could only post one job at a time for free. And we had more of like a SaaS model where you have to pay $250 a month to post more jobs. We did that for a long time, and it actually got us to our over $1 million in funding. But what we found was our engagement wasn't great. People were paying for it, and then they were churning. They would cancel 4 or 5 months later. It just wasn't a good model. And at the end of the day, the problem was that our value we would deliver month to month wasn't consistent with the value we charged. So one month they'd hire 20 people through us, and we only got $250. So we got the crappy end of the stick. The next month they wouldn't hire anyone. They would feel like they got screwed because we charged them $250 and they didn't do anything. So we had to create a more dynamic model where the revenue we made matched the value we delivered. So we switched to freemium. You post unlimited jobs for free, but you can sponsor your jobs. And when you sponsor a job, you can set whatever budget you want for the month, and you get charged $10 per application. We have companies who get 5 applications and they hire 4 people. So they paid $40, $50, and they got 4 people. That's an amazing value. And then we have some people who get 5, 6, 7 applications. They don't hire anybody. But I think on average, people are paying like less than $100 to hire someone, which is a pretty good deal. And
it's really incredible, honestly. Having worked with like some recruiting firms and some of the employment platforms, like that's a great deal. And
yeah.
And
that's
quality.
The thing is, we're not talking about lowering your standards. When you hire someone with a record, you're not lowering your standards. The people we place have higher than industry retention rates. I mean, our 90-day retention is about 75%. And we're talking for industries where natural churn is like 100, 200, 300% a year. So, for instance, like one of our biggest customers came to us and they said, hey, if we hire people through you and 50% of them are still with us after 60 days, we will double our contract with you. Well, I want to say 92% of them are still there at 60 days. So they're just like, you guys blew it out of the water.
Wow.
When we hire people, everyone, like half of them quit within 60 days, usually. So our retention is really nice. And I think that part of the reason for that is these people are genuinely grateful. Like you hire someone through Indeed, you hire someone through Indeed, like they're immediately maybe looking for another job as soon as they can, because for them, they're just looking for the best pay, the best benefits, the most leniency, like whatever. But for us, they're like, I just went 8 months without a job. Like, I'm not going to quit the first day I'm hungover or whatever. You know, I can't just get another job next week. So you're doing social good. You're finding very loyal employees. So that, you know, the value you get though is in getting an employee for a low cost that's willing to like stay. And we're thriving in the supply chain, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, skilled trades. But more and more we're seeing success in customer service, sales, call center. And, you know, 14 of my 18 employees have felonies. I've hired my senior software developers through our platform. My chief of staff has a record, my whole sales team, my whole recruiting team. So our steak and potatoes, if you will, is supply chain, but there's real opportunity for people who want to hire software developers through us or salespeople through us. So I just dropped that nugget there for anyone listening who wants to do that.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. I mean, I hope anyone listening that's doing any upcoming hiring goes to Honest Jobs first.
Yeah, and we actually have had a couple Denver startups that are kind of Series A level hiring through us in the Denver area recently that I was really glad to see. Then they're posting jobs that aren't entry level, no skill jobs. Because there's a lot of people like me.
Right.
There's a lot of people like me who are like, I have an education, I have a bachelor's degree, I have skills, you know, I have all that, but I can't find anybody that will like take me seriously after seeing the background check. So,
yeah, well, you know, it's obviously you've created this really awesome software platform. It sounded like sort of that clear hire spreadsheet you made back in the day sort of was the basis for the algorithm you're now using. Can you talk about sort of the tech element and how your algorithm maximizes?
Yeah,
fit?
absolutely. So when you do a deep dive of trying to understand why people will or will not hire someone with a record, you won't always get the truth because it's not a protected class. They can literally just say, we don't hire felons, or they can just lie to your face and say, oh, you weren't the best fit. The truth is, you know, a company could, if they made you an offer, that means you were the best fit. They looked at everyone they interviewed and they made you an offer. If after the background check they say, oh, actually, we didn't hire you, it was because your record, right? Like, I mean, there's no other explanation. So what we tried to figure out, though, was like, okay, why? So what we found out was there's companies that don't care and they're not following best practices because it's not a protected class. They're like, we don't have to consider you, so we're just not going to. There's a lot of companies like that who literally tell their hiring managers, if the application has a check on the box that says, yes, I have a record, just throw it away. I literally talked to hiring managers who said they were trained to throw away the applications that had that box checked. And that's why there's ban the box laws sweeping the country. Sweeping the country, the states are saying you can't ask people on an application if they have a record, because that's exactly what 90% of companies did, is they just said, well, I'm not going to interview that person. However, it didn't change the fact that they can still weed you out when you fail the background check. So that's pretty much what has been happening is since ban the box laws, you would just get an offer, and then after you got your hopes up and you were all excited, you would then get an email a day or two or three later saying, sorry, but we actually have to rescind the offer. So those are bad companies. The good companies would go through what's called a consideration process. And there's no law, but HR best practices and the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission has put out guidelines for people who want to do the right thing. And the right thing is you say, hey, they were qualified. We made them an offer. Let's assess the crime that they committed and when they committed it and try to see if we can make this work. So what we've done is we've looked at the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission guidelines, and they're pretty straightforward and clear. but there's some room for interpretation. So they ask you to look at the nature of the job versus the nature of the crime they committed and the time since conviction. So it's called nature, time, nature. And they teach you how to do this. Basically, I've looked at the job description and the nature of the job you're going to be performing, and the fact that you have a DUI does not matter at all. You're a remote software developer. You got the job because it doesn't matter. Like, there's no at all conflict. Like, for someone who's trained on nature, time, nature, and they're knowledgeable about it, they've done it before, they will hire that person with a DUI that has a felony DUI. But for a person who's never learned about this, they might just say, oh, a felony, I'm going to make an offer to the next best person. So what we did was we knew that we're getting job descriptions from these people. We can use natural language processing to interpret those job descriptions and come up with a very sophisticated way. When the job seeker creates an account, they tell us their criminal history. We don't share that with anybody. It's encrypted, but our algorithm can say, they have a DUI. Let's read all the job descriptions in their area, identify the jobs where there's no conflict in the job duties for someone with a DUI, and let's show them that these are the jobs that they should apply for. And we actually have a degree to which we promote it. So it's on a scale. This one you have a really good chance. This one you have a pretty good chance. This one you don't have a good chance. This one you're not going to get, right? So using that natural language processing paired with our kind of expertise on the topic, we have trained a model that you can give us any job description, and we can tell you how likely you are to make it through that background check based on just on your crime. So that job seekers, we analyze thousands of applications. Job seekers are taking our recommendation, so they're applying for the jobs we're asking them to apply for, and they're getting hired in 27 days. So we believe our algorithm is really helping them find jobs a lot faster. And we're just going to continue to improve on it over time and hope that companies continue to be more and more willing, because we can't make them hire anybody with felony. But if they want to hire people with records and they want to be smart about it, they can post jobs with us. Yeah. We have direct access to the talent pool, and we help weed out a lot of that operational inefficiency. The operational inefficiency is if you have a bunch of people with records apply for jobs arbitrarily, you're going to take them all the way to the offer and then have to rescind the offer, versus with us, you take them to the offer, and 9 times out of 10, you never have to rescind it because we already thought about the nature, time, nature process that you usually go to on the back end.
Got it. I mean, that's remarkable. It sounds like you've built some really incredible and thoughtful tech. And I know when you and I had a first conversation, one of the first things that kind of came to my mind at this point in the story was getting into the criminal justice system, into prisons. And you mentioned that you already have your app on prison tablets. Can you tell me about that and kind of how it happened?
Yeah, so it's been months in the works, but this week is actually the week that we're rolling out on tablets in prisons. There's some really big companies that put computers in prisons. They're basically, the only way that they have to do this is these devices that are custom built just for jails and prisons. It's basically an Android tablet. It's in a shell that's like indestructible. They can't hack it. They can't access the internet, but there's certain number of apps that are approved by the tablet provider. So there's usually apps that allow them to communicate with their loved ones, children, family. Then there's usually apps that are full of educational content, college classes, GED preparation, stuff like that. And then there will be like a music app where they can listen to music. Well, one of the biggest tablet providers in the country approached us about putting our app on their tablets. We had to build a custom version of our app so they can't access outside links and they can't do some stuff. We're not allowed to collect personal identifiable information from people that are in the justice system because they're essentially property of the state and they don't have the right to give us that information. Only the state has that right. So, it's a flaw in the 13th Amendment is that you are property of the state when you're incarcerated. So anyways, but the nice thing is that they are able to engage with our platform. They're able to see the jobs we have. They're able to learn about the employment opportunities available, and they're able to engage with our brand. So in that app, they can read about honest jobs. They can learn everything they can. They can set up an account. We're not getting their personal information, but then when they come home, they know about us. So there's 3 tablet providers that we're going to be working with, and over the next 12 months, we'll roll out on over 1 million tablets in jails and prisons across the country. So massive distribution, ability to educate them on our platform, but also in that app, they've given us freedom to add educational content to the app. So we can put videos, copy, we can put whatever we want. So we're really excited to expand beyond just our app, but having a tab where they can access our app, but they can also access other materials we can provide to them to provide hope, as well as just like actual educational opportunity to prepare them for the job when they get home. And the last thing I'll say is...
I'm really glad.
Sorry, the last thing I'll say on that side is we're also working closer with states, where the states are talking to us about having an automated system to where everyone coming home from jail or prison would be handed off to us to kind of be the service provider that's going to help people coming home from jail and prison find jobs faster. So we're talking with about a half dozen states about setting up some formal relationship where it can be handed off directly to us so that people can get a job as quickly as possible.
That's great to hear. I mean, I know notoriously people don't get a lot of support from the government when they leave the system. So at least, knowing that some states will be connecting them with you guys is something that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you've had to go through the traditional startup founding process, raising capital. Can you talk about just a little bit on what that was like and how you feel your felony conviction affected that process?
Yeah, what's funny is I actually remember when I first got my first venture capital check, I remember posting online about it because it didn't really affect it. It's one of the amazing things. That's why a lot of prisons are bringing in entrepreneurship programs, is because in America, no one can stop you from building a business. You can have disadvantages and you can have a tough start, but once you get the ball rolling, you're in charge. It's a glorious thing that for the underdog, entrepreneurship is everything. So I'll tell you, I knew nothing. I didn't have any mentors. I had my family that had master's degrees and stuff, but none of them knew anything about business or raising money. I grew up in a city where there's very little. I mean, I built my business in a city where there's very little resources. Columbus, Ohio is not where billion-dollar companies are born every day, especially in tech.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just having I recently published an article about product founder fit. So before you build a product, you really want to make sure you're working on a problem that you have some unique advantage to address this problem. So for me, that was one of the things I had going for me big time, was I have this story and that's why I'm the right person to solve this problem. So, early stage investors are investing pretty much on that. That's what they invest on, is tell me why you're the right person. I don't care about your mock-ups. I don't care about your $500 in revenue you've made. Why are you the right person to solve this problem? And really, I can attest to it that that's how you raise money in the beginning. So I was lucky that
Yeah. I can, from both sides of that experience as well, just, that if you're the right person for the job, it goes a really long way in raising money.
Yeah, so especially in the early days. So for me, it was I fell into the first $100,000 just by telling my story to people that are investors enough times that one of them, I wasn't even begging him to invest, but he was like, are you fundraising? And I was like, I would, but I don't know how. And he's like, well, why don't I give you some money? I'm like, okay, perfect. But so really that's how it happened, is I was obsessed. It's all I was thinking about. It's all I was working on. And I just told my story to so many people that eventually someone was like, hey, that's a really good founder story. That I got the first $100,000. And then also from there, I hadn't tried to raise venture capital money, but someone told me, hey, you should apply for the Techstars Workforce Development Accelerator. It's like perfectly aligned. So I didn't really think it was a good idea, and it was also in Denver. But then the pandemic hit, and we lost a bunch of customers like overnight. So when I applied to Techstars, it was interesting because they're pretty savvy investors, and they know, like, look, we're looking for like pre-seed startups, and they understand the problem founder fit. That like you go into Y Combinator or Techstars, like they're expecting you to completely change your product, probably. Yeah. Like whatever you have now, like probably will not look like this at all 6 months from now. So I think Techstars was smart enough to know like this is a big problem, and like hopefully we can pair him with good mentors who will help him find the product to address the problem. So for me, I think that was really it. And when I got my first big investment was during Techstars. So I got accepted into Techstars, and then two of my mentors in Techstars offered to invest 1.1 million. And in fact, one of them was Matchstick Ventures in Boulder, led by Natty Zola, a really great firm I've loved working with. They ran a background check on me in the diligence process. He like sent me the thing, and I was like, hey Natty, I just want to let you know, like I not only have a drug charge, but I have a grand theft charge. So like, I don't know if that's going to block me here. And he's like, oh no, it's good, dude. It's just part of our process. Just do it. I failed the background check, and then they wired me $1.1 million. Wow. And I that day wrote about it online because I'm like, I couldn't get a freaking. I remember being weeded out for a job at Raising Cane's as an assistant manager because of my record, because they said I was going to have access to the cash register. Raising Cane's wouldn't give me a job to work at a cash register. Venture capitalists wired $1.1 million after finding out about a grand theft charge. That goes to show you how important your past mistakes really are in the grand scheme of things. It's like, and that's our human bias, you know. It's just our human bias is like, people think what you did in the past is what you're going to do in the future. That's why people ask behavioral-based questions in interviews. They say, tell me about a time when you were able to manage stress. Because if you did something in the past, you'll do it in the future. So when they see, oh, you've stolen money, they assume you're going to steal money in the future, and it's just not the case. And I just thought it was really funny that I failed a background check and they still wired me the money. Yeah. And, you know, there's going to be a lot more where that came from. We're going to get much bigger investments than $1 million, and I suspect that they won't care about my record.
Well, yeah, it's great to see, you know, a little more logic coming into play than at a place where they just have the box check. Sounds like Techstars was a great experience. I know you've done some alumni work as well. You know, what inspired you to stay engaged?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just super grateful. You know, like I'm grateful for my education. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my first angel investor. God, that guy is like my hero. Like he will never have made an investment where the founder's more grateful. Techstars opened up a whole nother level of connectivity and knowledge that I would have never known. And I talked to founders today who are like, hey, I have this guy who wants to invest 500 grand or $1 million, but I don't know, man, the terms aren't that great. I'm like, dude, your life is about to change. I hear people say, oh, I don't know about Techstars. They want 7% equity. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? You live in Columbus, Ohio, or Iowa, or whatever. Go into Techstars. Like like your life, you know, people are very protective over equity when they're starting a company. But if you don't know a dozen other founders that have raised Series A's, take the deal, because before you know it, you're going to know dozens of founders who have raised Series A's. You're going to have access to dozens, if not hundreds, of investors. And your bubble expands to this massive network of access that's invaluable. So most people starting their first company, it probably won't be your last company. And the Techstars network, and I'm sure there's other, you know, accelerators that are similar, but the Techstars network was just invaluable to me.
This just came to mind, but have you thought about maybe in the future, or maybe one exists that I don't know about, but starting a sort of Techstars or an accelerator specifically for people with records?
Yeah. I haven't thought of, you know, I've tinkered with a bunch of ideas. So yes, I haven't thought about making it a formal accelerator like Techstars structure, but I own the Twitter handle for legit ventures, because people say go legit, like they're going legit, like they're not going to commit crime anymore. Yeah, so I've thought about starting a fund, like a fund where I invest in formerly incarcerated founders, and uh, I think, yeah, I own the domain legitventures.com. It doesn't matter what the name of it is, of course, but I absolutely have been thinking on this for years about, like, if I make it, how can I help other formerly incarcerated people, because you've probably heard the term before, but the people closest to the problem tend to be closest to the solution. And there's a whole lot of people incarcerated who are very bright and capable, and if they had access to the resources, they could probably come up with some really great solutions to social problems.
Absolutely. Well, I hope to see that come to fruition. And I know that you. Oh, and one more question specifically on Honest Jobs. Do you provide any additional services for applicants beyond job opportunities? Any follow up after they have a job?
Yeah, so we check in with people, which is kind of self-serving, right? We just want to know if they're still there. But
I mean, it serves them also. People could be going through something.
yeah, absolutely. So they get automated text messages that will ask them, how are things going? How are things with your boss? How are things with your coworkers? How's your transportation? And we get a lot of responses from people where they'll give us an update, which helps us understand, like, what happens after we get somebody hired. But we also have a partnership with a company out of Austin, Texas called findhelp.org. It's an enormous venture-backed company. They've raised a ton of money to build a digital version of basically 411, and it's like an API for social services. And in our app, we have a national resource center where you can search your location and find resources for housing, food, shelter, mental health, financial support, bus passes, I mean, everything. And like a third of our users engage in the API and find a service that they need. So they're finding something, if it's food, shelter, or transportation. We had a woman tell us that she was 3 months behind on her rent, and using
Wow.
that social services API in our app, she filled out a form, and then they mailed her a check for $3,200 for her back to help her with back rent. And she like called us and was like, "Thank you so much." And we're like, "You're welcome." Even though we didn't do it, like, it was just
You pointed her in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how we think about this: is we're trying to build a scalable platform that can serve 20 million Americans all across the country. We're a team of 17 people right now, so we're trying to be very product centric. Everything needs to be able to be scalable, and that leaves some people out in the beginning, but it also will be able to include a lot more people over time.
We touched on briefly, potentially, a venture fund at some point around people with records. But I know that you have started angel investing. What sort of got you into that, and are there any portfolio companies that you want to mention?
Uh, yeah. I'll be honest. I'm very new to it. I haven't made many investments, and I was invited to be a part of that group by my angel investor. So my angel investor invested almost 3 years ago, and he and I have been very close. I think he's very happy with his investment. He has been a great mentor to me, and he basically was like, "Hey, I really like the way you think about business, and I would love to have you join this thing because we could go in on deals together, and I would love to have another person close that I can like vet deals with." He also has a passion for the Columbus, Ohio area. He's invested in a lot of tech startups in Columbus, and I think he plans to do something more formal in the coming years here in Columbus. And I think this was a great exercise for he and I to work together on some stuff before doing anything official. So since I've joined the TBD Angels group, which is kind of based out of Boston, but they have people everywhere. I think there's like 200 members. They're all some really incredible, impressive people are a part of this. But then there's also a lot of people that are just like professors who invest like 5-10 grand once or twice a year in something. I've invested in. I've only made one investment so far. I'm about to probably make my second, and they're both very small. Checks. I'm not rich yet. I'm rich on paper. I'm rich on paper. I'm poor in the real bank account. But there's a company called Carlocity that I invested in that I really big fan of the founder. They're out of Phoenix, Arizona. Carlocity is anonymous car buying, so you can negotiate deals without ever exposing, the clothes you're wearing, the color of your skin, the gender you are, which is a big problem. Lots of research shows that literally just based on how you're dressed, you could pay $1,000 more for a vehicle because they know that you don't have a lot of cash. You clearly aren't, a college educated person. And then of course, if you're like a woman of color, they're not budging on the sticker price because they're like, why, it's really messed up, but it's true. So he's got a lot of early traction showing that people are getting, especially women and people of color, are getting better deals on their vehicles. And he's very early stage, but really nice product. And he's got some good early traction. And I think he's just a great human being.
Sounds like a really great business opportunity. I love, these things that are bringing more equality to our society. One step at a time. We certainly have a ton of work to do, but it's great to hear that there's things like that out there.
And then I just say, for anyone listening, I'm a very small check, but if you want me to look at your stuff, marketplaces, anything with like network effects, I have learned quite a bit over the years about. And I also, the best thing I can offer as an angel investor is if that I want to invest, I would bring you to the network, which means the network can invest. I've seen them. You pitch the network, one person invests, then 15 people invest, and you end up walking away with like a $500,000 pre-seed investment or something.
Yeah. You're a valuable strategic partner and strategic investor. So I know you also do advocacy work. Can you talk about those ongoing efforts?
Yeah, and I'm just getting into it. I'll tell you, it's something that I'm passionate about more and more every day. My focus is on the criminal justice reform. It's where I have the most knowledge and experience. It's where I can get the most attention. So I helped pass the bill in Colorado that was called the Clean Slate Act. I testified to Congress about how thousands of people every year are eligible to get their record expunged. However, to actually get your record expunged, you have to hire an attorney who has to do a bunch of paperwork. Then you have to go to court, and then they'll expunge your record. So they will expunge your record, but you have to jump through all these hoops. And there's just like a date, like based on your sentencing, on this date, you're eligible for expungement. But what happens is so many people never get it expunged because they're poor and they have a job and they have kids and they're like, I can't hire an attorney, let alone get time off of work to go to court and do all this stuff. So in Colorado, there's a bill being introduced called the Clean Slate Act, which said it will automatically be expunged on that date, because why would we not? Like programmatically, we can just expunge it. So I testified for that, and it ended up passing unanimously. It's law in Colorado now that when you're eligible for expungement, it will automatically be expunged. So why that?
That's
why?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. There's a whole team of people that did all the work. They just asked me to testify and talk about why it was important. And why it's important is because these people apply for a job and they get dinged and then they don't get the job. And as a business owner in Colorado, I've hired a dozen full-time employees in Colorado, and I've helped a lot of other employees hire people in Colorado. People in Colorado need people. Like the companies are looking for employees, and it's a cost center. They're struggling. They're spinning their wheels trying to find people, and it's costing Colorado business. So you got to tie it all back to business, and that's actually my angle for criminal justice reform and advocacy is most of this stuff can be tied back to business, and when business speaks up, lawmakers pay attention. When you're able to tie it back to a business case, policymakers tend to pay attention. So that's one, and then the other one I've been working on here in Ohio is bail reform. I think that cash bail is criminal. I think cash bail perpetuates poverty and racism. Without going into it too deep, the question you got to ask yourself is: a judge says, "I'm gonna approve you for bail." That's basically the judge saying, "I don't think that you're a threat to society, and for that reason, you can go home." No matter no matter what's going on, if a judge says, I don't think you're a threat to society, you can go home, why should there be a $500 step between them saying you can go home and if you actually get to go home? So a judge says you get bail, but then there's this cash bail system that says, well, you got to pay $2,000. Okay, well, all the people who had privilege in their life, who had a good education, who had a good job, go home. And then all the people who are already in poverty, who didn't have a lot of advantages, are stuck in jail because if I pay this $2,000, the family that's putting up the money is going to have to choose between food and rent and electric and gas money, or getting their mother out of jail or their father out of jail. And it just really holds people down in a way it is not based on community safety. It is not based on being fair or equal or just. It's completely arbitrary, and it's a whole industry that's built on extremely unfair practices. So, as you can tell, I'm passionate about it. I think we should end cash bail. There's absolutely no case for it.
Absolutely. And thank you for that work. Thank you for sharing that. It's come up a few times in our conversation that, people have come back to you or to the company and just thanked you for all the support and where they are now. Is there one story in particular that kind of stands out of when you really saw your work affecting change?
Yeah, up until yesterday, I had a story about a woman who cried about she got arrested for stealing formula, and her kids got taken from her because she was in jail, and she just bawled her eyes out because she was like, I just wanted to feed my children. Then I got arrested, my kids got taken away from me. It was this horrible experience, right? So I'm getting like teary-eyed talking about it. Like, such a powerful testimony because she had gotten a job now. She was making like $9 more than she'd ever made before. She had benefits for the first time in like 10 years. Super powerful story. Then yesterday, it's the latest testimonial on our website. You can go to our website and watch testimonials, but this latest testimonial was a guy who literally said, like, he's doing this little testimonial. I don't record the testimonials. Someone else on my team does, but he's like, whoever created this company, I owe them my life. He's like, I'm not joking. I was almost done. He's like, I was so depressed and so hurt by so much rejection. Whoever started this thing, I owe him my life. I'm like, Jesus. Like, wow. I called my fiance in the room. I'm like, you got to watch this. Sometimes it's overwhelming to think that, like, I created that. I know it's not just me, but it's like my team and what we're doing.
You created it. I mean, you seeded this, like, absolutely. I mean, you need to sit back and appreciate the work that you're doing, because it really, small, even little things can greatly affect individuals' lives. And what you're doing, you're putting a ton of work into affecting lives. And, it's awesome that you get to see that and hear the appreciation.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't care what I exit for. If I sell for one day, if I sell for 25 million or 2.5 billion, like, it's not going to matter as much as like remembering those testimonials and the impact we've had. Yeah. Or if we completely fail, like, I won't care. This will be the best way I could have spent my time. I know that to be 100%. True. So,
I tend to ask people who they have in their lives that they consider a mentor. You mentioned, initially you didn't have any. Then you had your angel investor, you had Techstars. Like, is there anyone else or any of those people that you want to specifically highlight of being, really impactful mentor to you?
Yeah. So when I was a homeless teenager, I had a friend's mom that was unconditionally loving, and I'm eternally grateful for her. Lisa Givens in Gainesville, Florida. But since my release, I think my person I can attribute so much learning from, and I am just the most grateful for, is Tom Rutledge. Tom Rutledge, he's my angel investor who invited me to TBD Angels, just because the guy genuinely invested in me. Like, there was no clear, like, dollar he was going to make off of me, and he gave me $100,000. My first investment ever, $100,000. No co-investor, no like proof of concept. I had nothing, and this guy invested in me, and he's treated me extremely well. And, there's a lot of people who have put way more money in than him at this point. But he stands out as someone who I want to be something like him, when I'm older.
Yeah,
And part of that
that's
is
awesome.
not because he's an investor. Like, I know investors who are much more successful than him and have more money than him and stuff. But he invested in my company because of what we were working on and my story. He invested in a company called Aunt Flo. Her name's Claire Coder, who provides free menstrual products in schools and businesses across the country. Her company's huge, and I just think that the guy worked really hard to get to where he is, but he's um, making money, making an impact in a really well balanced manner that I really respect. So if you haven't had Claire Coder on the podcast, you should. I know her well, so I'd be
Yeah.
happy to introduce you. She's a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely welcome that intro. Would love to have her on. Certainly appreciate the work that she's doing. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. If you'd like, you can ask me a question now.
What um, in your life made you want to focus on telling like these stories? Like what led you to thinking that people are really the answer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like that. For me, for some reason, it really goes back to I had this small business management class in school at Boston University, and I was not a school person. I generally just like wanted to get through it and just say I did it. But there were handfuls of classes that I enjoyed, and those are the ones I excelled in. And one of those was small business management with Bill Galatis, who is owns all the Dunkin' Donuts in the Boston area and some other ones. And one day, he was talking about the hardest thing in business. People would ask him, and he just wrote people really big on the board and he
Yeah.
circled it.
Yep.
And so ever since that, I just have just been fascinated by just like the personal people element of everything. And as I've gotten more into, advocacy and criminal justice reform and drug policy reform, I've seen like all these incredible people doing oftentimes thankless work that has tremendous impact on people's lives. And for every issue that's out there, there's someone inspiring working on making it better and working on a solution. And so I started to realize that. And, I had been wanting to create a podcast in general. Just I enjoy broadcast. I wanted to create something that didn't have to deal with the barriers of Hollywood that I deal with in my film production business, and an outlet for my creative energy. But the thing that came to mind as the best way to do that was to highlight people that are doing incredible things that may not be getting heard from. So people have just shown me over time that they're the answer to the world's problems, and I really enjoy having this little platform to highlight some of them on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I wish I could go back and ask you. Like people
Yeah.
are the answer. Ha- how does that taste in today's climate where everyone sucks and people are the problem a little bit too? Like I think that
Yeah.
people will be the answer, but it's like we need a new wave of people.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about like our media in general, I feel like is it's very negative focused, also focused on outliers. And so I think a lot of us, unfortunately, in today's society, feel generally bad about society as a whole. But when you really take a personal look at it and talk to people, you realize there's for every bad person, there's at least a couple of amazing people, that just aren't making noise, which is
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. I
Um,
just heard.
so I try to bring a more positive outlook.
Yeah, I just heard someone say the people the farthest to the right and the farther to the left are always the loudest. Like the loudest people
Exactly.
get all the attention, and they're always the furthest away from everyone else. Uh, so I don't know where you sit politically, but I've been I assume you're going to chop this out, but I listened to a few episodes of the Uncommon or Uncommon Ground. Have you heard that Uncommon Ground by
Yeah, I'm familiar with
Van
it. Yeah.
Jones?
Yep.
Yeah, I
100%.
just started listening to it, but I really like that the tone is it's a different approach to talking about policy and politics. Is not seeking to tear down everybody and say how the world's burning. It's seeking to talk about the
Yeah.
stuff. So
Like, let's have a conversation. We have more in common than all of these people that think they hate each other. They don't realize how much they have in common. And if you go back a few episodes ago, I interviewed Todd Rose, who's an incredible author, and his most recent book, Collective Illusions, talks about a lot of this and how what you think everyone's thinking usually isn't the case, and how, for instance, we were talking about the loud people on the left and the right. He had a stat from, I believe, 2018 that 10% of the creators on Twitter were creating 80% of the content. Yep. So as a consumer of Twitter, you might see, oh, this is what everyone thinks, but no, it's really what this loud 10% thinks.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah. So I'm not in politics now, but I tell you, one day I might be. I don't know. I don't want to. It'll probably ruin my life if I get into it. But I feel like at this point we need some people who have an interest other than like getting stage time and mic time.
I would argue that you are somewhat in politics. Just given what you're working in. You talked about some of your political advocacy that takes place, and myself. I really don't like politics. It's a mess, but drug policy and then eventually criminal justice reform, I became passionate enough to get involved. I don't want to run for office, but it's unfortunately a way that we have to work with the system in order to create change. And, I'd argue that you're in politics.
Yeah. And I didn't bring up earlier, but marijuana is definitely something I'm passionate about. I mean, it's funny that even just like 10 years ago, that'd be a strange thing to say, but it's so blatantly obvious that it's such a better medicinal product than Oxycontin and Xanax, and it can replace so many things. And then beyond that, like, people shouldn't be in jail and prison for smoking marijuana. Like, it's just stupid that we criminalize someone for it. And I think it's one of the more clear ways that government got too big. Like, there's a lot of things where we can debate if government should be involved or not, but I don't think that government should lock you up because you found a plant, lit it on fire, and inhaled it. Like, I mean, It's just not the government's place to get in your way and say, hey, don't smoke leaves. Like,
Agreed.
So anyways, you can cut that out or leave it in. I don't care. I'll take it. But I'm pretty passionate about not only making it legal, but also retroactively relieving people of the convictions from marijuana charges, when there's now privileged billionaires making crap loads of money off of it, when just a couple years ago some poor people who sold a ounce of weed on the corner went to prison for 5 years or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, not even just a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, there's still both states as well as countries where that's still happening, and certainly something that myself and a lot of advocates are trying to fix. And we could talk about that all day.
Let me know
we can,
if I can ever contribute in any way to something that you're working on in that space. I'd be happy to.
I appreciate it. So I just have a couple more. If everything were to end tomorrow, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think I'm most proud of the fact that I have worked to rebuild relationships with my mom and my brother. My mom represents a lot of people, I think, where they had a really hard time. They made poor decisions, and I've been able to build a really good relationship with my mom over the last year and a half. And it wasn't always easy. There was multiple times where I had to send her money because she'd call me crying that she was homeless. There was times where I had to fly and spend money over and over and over again to help my mom or my brother. They've both been in terrible situations. But I'm proud of the fact that I was able to come out of my own horrible situation and not be bitter about, there's some resentment. There's some level of all of that. But I'm proud that I am able to look beyond that and love my mom, love my brother, and still find peace and healing in all of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm glad that you were, open-minded and open-hearted enough to move in that direction.
Yeah.
So there's one big question I ask all the guests, and at some point I'm going to put together some kind of compilation, but if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
I don't feel like any answer I could give you is going to actually be like the right answer or even like close to being right, but I think
there's no right answer. There's so many things we could do.
It's going to be a really strange answer, but I think like if you could snap your fingers and everyone would just treat each other the way they wanted to be treated, it obviously sounds amazing. Like what a world to live in where everyone's just super kind. It's interesting to think about what the consequences of that would be, though, because everything would change. It could almost be to the detriment of a lot of systems, right? You think about capitalism's built on people being treated differently. Like societies were built on wealth that was generated by people not being treated the same. So I don't know where society would be. I mean, maybe we'd all just be living in like fields and eating off the land and stuff, which could be in some ways better, but in some ways,
healthier for the environment, for sure.
We may not have Zoom or the tools we use because there was no, as bad as it can be sometimes, motivation for a better life drives people to build careers and tools and industries and all of that. So I think the reverberation of it all would be could be great, could be but I think to your point though, people would be happier. You don't need Zoom to be happy. You just need to be treated well and loved and respected. So I think that's it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks so much for sharing. And, how can people listening support you and your impact? I like I already said, anybody hiring should go check out Honest Jobs, or obviously anybody with a record that is looking for a job. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a super clear ask. I guess my ask is, change your heart and your mind if it wasn't already changed, and advocate for other people to change their heart and mind. But the one tangible ask I would have is follow me on LinkedIn, because if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll probably love the stuff that I share, and help me spread the message.
Well, thanks for being so open and transparent today and vulnerable. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you and I can continue speaking, and excited to share this with the audience. And thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. To find out more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.